Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Paul, I'm with the Dicey Review. And today we're going to be learning how to play the 2 to 4 player game, The Castles of Tuscany, being released by Ravensburger and Alea. Castles of Tuscany comes with all of the components that you see here, including 12 blocks of marble, 12 workers, and 10 blue hexagons, 25 square bonus tiles, 1 scoring board, 12 random region boards separated into A, B, and C tiles, 8 color bonus tiles, 1 start player card, 27 yield cards, 122 region cards, 4 player boards, 32 neutral beige-backed tiles, and then player components in 4 different colors. To begin setup, assemble the scoreboard and place it in the middle of the table. Next, shuffle all of the region cards and place them near the play area where all players can easily access them. Then shuffle the yield cards and place them in an easily accessible area for all players as well. Then you'll want to take the 25 bonus tiles, sort them by the different types, there are 5 each, and then place them near the play area. Next, you'll want to find and place the 8 different color bonus tiles near the play area. There are 2 sides to these tiles, a 1 and a 2 side. Just make sure that all of the tiles are showing the side that says 1. Then place the 12 blocks of marble, 12 workers, and 10 blue hexagons near the scoring board. Then find and separate out all of the neutral tiles. These are the tiles that have a beige back. Shuffle all of these tiles, and then make a few stacks near the play area. It doesn't matter how many stacks, just as long as they're mixed and within easy reach. You'll then need to give each player some components. Each player should receive 1 player board. Then each player would need to receive all of the hex tiles with their chosen player color on the back, in addition to 1 double-sided castle tile, which you can set aside just for now. Stack your tiles into 3 different stacks of 7, and then place 1 stack each on these markings that say 1, 2, and 3. After you're done, you'll have 3 stacks that look like this. Then each player would take the 2 wooden pawns in their color. They would place the shorter wooden pawn on the outside ring of the score track, and they would place the taller, thinner pawn on the inside ring of the score track that's red. Make sure that each player also has their 50 and 100 point score marker nearby, just in case they reach that. Each player will draw 5 region cards secretly. Then each player will randomly be dealt 1 each of the A, B, and C region boards. Then each player will form their own play area by placing these hexes long edge to long edge next to each other. You can rotate these tiles however you want to. The only restriction is the tiles can't be offset by more than 1 hex. So for instance, if I wanted to place this tile like this play area would be offset by 2 hexes, so that would break the rule. But I could place it like this, or I could place it down 1 space like this, however you want to rotate them, just so long as they're not breaking that offset rule. So for instance, this player might decide to place their area like this, and this would be their play area that they would build different tiles and buildings onto. After the players decide what orientation they want for their starting area, they will then place their double-sided starting green castle marker on any one of the dark green spaces on their player board. So they could place it up here, they could place it right here, wherever they want to start, they can place it down. And this will matter because in the game, they'll have to build adjacent to this starting building. Then the youngest player becomes the start player and gets this start player card. This card won't change hands for the rest of the game. Each player then gets to choose any one of the 5 bonus tiles to start the game with. And we're going to go into more detail about what these bonus tiles do while explaining the game, but just so you know, during setup, one of these tiles will be picked by each player. So we could say, for instance, that this player picks this tile, and this bonus tile will go to the right of the action icon that matches right here, and that will power up this type of action during the game. And let's say, for instance, that the blue player decides to pick this bonus tile, which will increase their storage for tiles during the game, which once again we'll explain in a moment. It is important to note that whenever this bonus tile is taken, the player would immediately get 2 green victory points. And that also takes place during setup. So if this bonus tile is chosen during setup, the player who chose it would immediately gain 2 points on the green track. The player would notate this by moving their marker up 2 spaces. And it's important to note that if you get green points, you move on the green track, and if you gain red points, you move on the red track. The difference between these tracks will be explained later in more detail. Finally, deal 8 of the beige-backed tiles out into a central display, and then you're ready to play the game. A game of Castles of Tuscany will last for 3 rounds, and at the start of each round, the start player, or the player who's holding the start player card, will take a turn, and then each player will take a turn in clockwise order around the table. On a player's turn, they can take one of 3 actions. The first potential action a player could take is to draw region cards. Now, drawing cards can be a great action for a couple of reasons. First, you have no hand limit in this game, so you can draw as many as you want. Also, cards allow you to play out tiles on your personal player board, so taking this action can be beneficial. To take this action, the player will simply draw 2 cards from the top of the deck and place them in their hand. Now, in the rulebook of the first printing of this game, it says that the action to draw cards allows you to draw 2 cards from the deck. The designer of the game has since come out and altered that rule slightly to say that the action actually consists of drawing 3 cards. You can play this either way. Personally, going forward, I'm going to draw 3 cards when taking this action. Also, if the deck ever runs out, simply shuffle the discard pile and form a new draw deck. The next action a player could take on their turn is to take a Hex Tile. To take this action, a player can choose any one of the 8 tiles that's face up in the middle of the table, and after taking the tile, they would place it on the storage space of their player board. It's important to note that players start the game with room for only 1 tile, but if they can add extensions during the game, they'll have room to store more tiles. After taking any tile that they want from the middle, the player would replace the tile from the top of their leftmost stack and place that in the middle of the market. Now, a player's tile stack running out is the trigger for the end of the round, but we'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. It's also important to note that a player can take a tile if they don't have any storage. First, they would just have to discard the tile that they already have, putting this back in the box, and then placing one of the tiles from the middle on their storage space. Even though you can do this, it's probably a good idea to avoid it if possible. It's also important to note that if 5 tiles of the same color are ever in the market, you immediately stop, set those 5 tiles aside, and draw 5 replacements from the top of the beige stacks in the middle. The third possible action a player can take on their turn is to place a tile. To place a tile, a player has to have a tile in their storage area ready to place. So in this case, we do. Then, a player has to pay for that tile by playing cards from their hand. Each tile has a color and a picture in the middle of the tile. To play a tile, you have to play 2 cards from your hand that match that tile's color and picture. So for instance, to play this tile, you could play 2 cards that match this tile from your hand. The player would simply create a discard pile near their play area, and then they could place the tile onto their region board. Instead of playing cards that match the color of the tile that you want to play, a player can replace any color card with a pair of cards of a different color. So for instance, to play this beige tile, a player could pay 1 beige card and then a pair of light green cards to act as a beige. Or a player could play these 2 pairs of cards, 2 dark green and 2 light green, to act as 2 beige. Basically, a pair of cards of one color can be treated as wild. Now, when placing tiles onto your region board, there's only 2 rules that you have to remember. First, you always have to place tiles next to a tile that you already have on your board. And the second rule is that tiles can only be placed on spaces that match their color. So for instance, this beige tile could either be placed here or here. These would both be legal placements because the color matches and it's touching a tile that you've previously placed. Each time a tile is placed on a region board, it gives a player an immediate bonus. The bonuses are listed on the player board here for players' reference, but we'll go over each bonus now. If a player places a beige tile, they immediately draw 1 card from the yield deck. The player would immediately resolve the bonus on the yield card and then discard the yield card. Yield card bonuses can vary depending on what's on the card, but they're always good for the player who draws them. For instance, this yield card allows a player to immediately draw 2 region cards. This card would give a player 1 point on the green track. This card would allow a player to gain 1 worker, and this card would allow a player 2 points on the red track. If a player places a yellow tile on their board, they would immediately draw 3 region cards from the deck. If a player places an orange tile on their board, they would immediately gain 1 worker from the supply. Players can have as many of these workers as they want, there's no limit, and workers are helpful because they can be spent as a wild card. So for instance, if this player wanted to play a gray tile on their turn, they could spend one gray card, and then they could get rid of one worker as the missing gray card. When a player places a gray tile on their turn, they would immediately gain one marble. Now once again, there's no limit to how much marble a player can have, and marble, if spent, would allow a player to take one extra action on their turn. So for instance, a player could spend this marble to either draw cards, take a tile, or play a tile. And it's important to note that this action can be taken immediately when the marble is gained. So for instance, after placing this gray tile on their board, a player would gain one marble. They could then immediately spend that marble if they wanted to draw cards. If a player places a light green agriculture tile on their board, they would immediately score points for every new type of agriculture that they're placing within an agriculture zone. There are 4 different types of agriculture in the game: pigs, grapes, wheat, and olives. And there are even some agriculture tiles that have 2 types of agriculture on the same tile. For instance, this tile shows wheat and pigs. So by placing this tile, this player would score 1 point. This is because this is the first time that pigs have showed up in this 3-hex agriculture zone on this player's region board. Now if on a future turn a player were to place this olive tile, they would then score 1 point again because this is the first time they've placed olives in this agriculture zone. If the player were to place this tile on a future turn, this tile shows 2 types of agriculture: pigs and wheat. Now it's important to note that this tile would only score a player 1 point when placed. This is because pigs already exist in this agriculture zone. If the first tile placed had been grapes instead of pigs, then when placing this tile, the player would score 2 points immediately. That's because they would have added wheat and pigs to this agriculture zone for the first time. And when gaining points for this particular bonus, you would move your marker along the green track. If a player places one of the blue end tiles on their turn, they would immediately gain one of the blue hexagon pieces from the supply. This piece would go on their tile storage area and would act as a wild tile of any color on a future turn. You can only gain this benefit if you have room to store the hexagon piece. So in our example, after playing the end tile, they immediately freed up space to gain the wooden hexagon piece. And once again, this tile can be treated as a tile of any color. You just have to pay the cost to play it just like normal. So for instance, on their next turn, a player could play these 2 dark green cards and then play this hexagon piece out on the board and treat it as if it were a castle. You would then immediately take the bonus of whatever color you're pretending that this tile is. In our example, you would take the castle bonus. This action would be treated exactly the same way as if you had just placed a castle tile. So since we're pretending that this tile is a castle, let's go ahead and look at what the castle does for you. When a player places a castle tile on their board, they immediately pick any one of the 8 tiles from the middle and place it for free on their board without paying any cards. You do still have to follow the color and adjacency rule, but you don't have to pay the cards to play this tile. So for instance, by taking the castle bonus, the player could immediately take this red tile and play it on their board for free without paying any cards. And speaking of the red tile, let's look at what this tile does for us when we place it. When you place a red tile on your board, you immediately take one available bonus tile from the supply and place it next to the matching space of your player board. Once again, remembering that if you take this tile, you immediately gain 2 points whenever you take the bonus tile. These bonus tiles power up your actions on your turn. And there's no limit to how many bonus tiles a player can have on their player board. The only limit is the number of tiles in the game. This bonus tile, for instance, allows you to have more tiles in storage. So instead of storing 1 tile, this player can now store 2. This gives them more options on selecting tiles from the middle of the table. This bonus tile allows you to draw an additional card whenever you take the draw cards action. And these tiles stack. So having 2 of these bonus tiles would allow you to draw 2 additional cards every time you take the draw cards action. And these bonus tiles all work in the same way. If you have an additional bonus tile for marble, workers, or yield cards, whenever you gain the bonus from placing these matching tiles, you would get an additional one of these benefits. So 2 marble, 2 workers, or drawing and resolving 2 yield cards. Now that we've looked at the bonuses that you get from placing tiles, I want to quickly mention gaining points from a tile's region size. If you place down a tile of a specific color that completes a region of 1, you would score 1 green point. If you complete a region of 2, you would score 3 green points. And if you complete a region of 3, you would score 6 green points. So for instance, on this player's region board, they have a region of light green made up of 3 hexes. If they place their second tile here, they wouldn't gain the region bonus yet because the region isn't complete. But if they place a third tile completing this region of 3 hexes, they would immediately gain 6 green points. In the same way, whenever this gray region is completed by placing this 1 gray tile, this player would immediately score 1 additional green point for completing this 1 hex region. In this gray region example, the player hasn't scored the region bonus yet because they haven't completed this region. When they place their second gray tile in this area, they would gain an additional 3 green points immediately for fulfilling a 2 hex region. Another way that a player will get bonus points during the game is covering every tile on their board of a specific color. So for instance, if this player placed this second blue end tile, they would have covered every blue tile on their region board. The first player to do this immediately claims the bonus on the matching color bonus tile. So for instance, for covering up all of their blue tiles, this player would immediately gain 2 green points for completing that task. After a player has claimed a bonus, they would flip the tile over to where it shows the number 2. Then, the next player to complete that bonus would then score that bonus one more time, gaining a lower victory point number, in this example 1, and then the tile would be removed from the game. There are bonus tiles for every color on the board, so the first person to complete all of the gray tiles would get this bonus, the first person to complete all of the beige tiles would get this bonus, and so on. Players will continue to take turns until any one player empties their stack of tiles for the current round. So in the first round, whenever a player places their last tile into the middle market, the round end will be triggered. Each player will take an equal number of turns, and then a scoring phase will happen. So for instance, since the start player triggered the end of the first round, the second player would get 1 turn, and then the round would end. At the end of each round, a player will transfer all of the points on their green track over to their red track. So in this instance, the red player would gain 16 points on the red track because they currently have 16 points on the green track. Then, the blue player would gain 13 points on the red track because they currently have 13 points on the green track. They already gained 2 red points from a bonus during the round, so this would put them up to 15 total points on the red track. And it's important to note that you don't reset the green track. The points will stay there and continue to transfer over to the red track at the end of every round. After players have transferred their points over, a new round would begin, with the starting player taking a turn. Not everyone will have used all of their tiles in the first round, so some players will have to remove tiles from stack 1 even in round 2. In this example, the blue player wasn't able to play all of their tiles before round 1 ended, so they would continue to remove tiles from their 1 stack and then start removing from their 2 stack. And it's important to note that to trigger the end of round 2, they would have to fully empty their second stack as well. Players will continue playing until one player has placed the last tile of their third stack into the display. At this point, the end of the game would be triggered. Players would once again play until everyone's had an equal number of turns, and then all players would get 1 more turn, and then the game would end. At the end of the third round, players would once again add their green point total to the red track. If this would cause players to gain more than 50 points, they can take the 50-point indicator in their color to show this. After adding the green points to the red track, players would gain 1 additional red victory point for every unused wooden piece on their player board. So in this example, 1 red point for this worker and 3 red points for these marble pieces. They would also gain 1 red point for any unplaced hex tile or unplaced wooden hex piece on their player board, so 2 for these. And then finally, they would gain 1 red victory point for every 3 cards in their hand. So in this example, 1 victory point for these 5 cards. After adding these additional points, the player with the highest score on the red victory point track is the winner. If there's a tie, whoever has the most empty spaces on their region board would win. If there's still a tie, the tied player with the fewest victory points on the green scoring track would win. And if there's still a tie, the tied player with the fewest remaining region cards would win. All right, everybody, that was our video. We hope that it was helpful and we hope that it was informative. If you have any questions at all about how to play the game, or you would just like to post your thoughts about the game, please comment below or email us directly at thedicey@gmail.com. You can read our written reviews at thedicey.review.com and make sure and connect with us on social media or by visiting our Board Game Geek Guild. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.